Anna was 32 when her world split open. The papers had been dropped on the table so casually, as if ending a marriage was no heavier than tossing away an old receipt. The sound of the envelope sliding across the glass echoed in her ears long after he left the room. She sat there, staring at his handwriting scrawled on the edge, her name written like it was already a stranger's. She told herself not to cry, not to give him the satisfaction, but the tears pressed against her throat anyway, hot and stubborn. Her husband, Daniel, had walked out without turning back. No slammed doors, no raised voice, just the sharp silence of a man who had made up his mind long before she knew there was a decision to make. Anna stayed frozen, holding the papers, as though they might vanish if she didn't open them. But she knew what was inside. She could already feel the crack forming across her chest. Divorce. That word she never thought would have her name attached to it. The first thought that clawed into her head wasn't even about love. It was about the years she had invested, the time she had fought for him, the sacrifices she had made, all bundled into that neat stack of legal words. She whispered to herself, trying to understand, but the answers didn't come. She wanted to scream, but instead she sat still, gripping the edge of the table as if the wood could hold her upright. Daniel had been her anchor, or at least she thought he was. He had been the man who once promised that she was all he wanted, who kissed her forehead when she doubted herself, who made her believe she had found a home in another person. Now he was the man who had left her alone with a pen and a broken vow. Anna remembered the first time they met. She had been 25, too young to know how permanent choices could feel, but old enough to crave something steady. He came into her life like light cutting through heavy curtains. He was charming, polished, someone who spoke with certainty, and she, still grieving the sudden loss of her father, had been caught off guard by how safe he made her feel. He filled the silence that had haunted her house. He made her laugh when she thought she had forgotten how. But safety can be a disguise. She didn't see it then, the way his eyes lingered too long on control, the way his words sometimes pressed down instead of lifting her up. He was perfect until he wasn't, and by the time she noticed the cracks, she was already wearing his ring. Back at the table, the envelope trembled in her hand. She forced herself to tear it open. Each page was cold, sharp. His lawyer's words, not his. No explanations, no apologies. Just statements, demands, conditions. She read them once, then again, the letters blurring as her vision burned. She pressed her hand against her chest as if she could hold her heart together before it spilled across the floor. She thought of the nights she had waited for him, dinners growing cold, excuses piling up. She thought of how often she had asked him if something was wrong, and how often he smiled that hollow smile and told her everything was fine. Now she realized the truth had been sitting in silence, waiting for this moment. Anna's mind raced to what people would say. The whispers, the questions. Divorce was not just between two people. It spilled into every corner of life. Friends who would choose sides. Family who would pretend to understand but secretly judge. She imagined walking into her mother's house, hearing the pity in her voice. She imagined the eyes of neighbors, the ones who had once admired their matching cars, their expensive vacations, their picture-perfect smiles. Her stomach twisted. She hated how much she cared about appearances, but she couldn't help it. Their life together had been a performance, one she had played well. And now the curtain had fallen, leaving her exposed. She stood up, pacing the kitchen like an animal trapped in its own cage. The floor felt unsteady, as though the house itself had shifted. Every corner held his shadow. The chair he used to sit in. The cup he left half-finished on the counter. The jacket still hanging by the door. It was unbearable. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from a friend popped up, asking if she was free for dinner. Anna stared at the screen, her fingers numb. She couldn't tell anyone yet. To say it out loud would make it real. She set the phone face down, as if the world could wait until she was ready. She leaned against the counter, trying to catch her breath, but a thought cut through the fog. What if this was her fault? What if she hadn't been enough? The question stabbed her over and over, even as she tried to push it away. She remembered the arguments, the nights when words flew sharp and unforgiving. She remembered how he sometimes looked at her with eyes that seemed to be searching for someone else. She whispered his name, not sure if she wanted him to hear it or to erase it. Daniel. The sound of it felt foreign on her lips, like a name that didn't belong to her anymore. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Time was moving forward whether she wanted it to or not. She grabbed the papers again, flipping through them until a smaller envelope slid out from between the pages. Her pulse jumped. This wasn't part of the divorce. This was different. Her name was written across it, not by a lawyer, but by Daniel himself. His handwriting was rushed, almost sloppy, like he hadn't wanted to think too hard about it. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet. She pulled it out slowly, her chest tightening. This wasn't legal language. This was personal. She could feel it before she read a single word. Anna held her breath. Her eyes scanned the page, but the words tangled, heavy and confusing. Then one line stood out, hitting her like a blow. You'll find out soon enough. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever. She dropped the letter, her knees weak. What truth? What had he been hiding all this time? The room spun around her. Divorce was one thing, betrayal was another, but this was a shadow she couldn't name. And suddenly, the papers in her hand were not the end. They were only the beginning. Anna didn't sleep that night. She lay on the couch with the papers scattered across the coffee table, the mysterious letter folded neatly on top, mocking her every time her eyes drifted toward it. The house felt haunted by silence, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes you believe you're not alone. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face, the cold way he had slid the envelope across the table, the way he didn't even glance back when he left. She tried to piece together what the note could mean. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever. The words burned. She replayed their years together like a movie, pausing at every odd moment, every unanswered question. There had been hints, hadn't there? The late nights at the office. The hushed phone calls he stepped outside to take. The way he sometimes avoided her gaze when she talked about children. She remembered how he always redirected the conversation, how he promised soon, but soon never came. Children. That word was heavy in her chest. It was the unspoken ache that had lived between them for years. Anna wanted them. She wanted little feet running across the hardwood floors, wanted laughter spilling down the hallway, wanted the kind of messy chaos that made a house feel alive. Daniel had smiled when she brought it up, kissed her cheek, and told her he wanted the same. But excuses piled up like bricks, walling her in. Too much work. Too much stress. Not the right time. And Anna, desperate to believe him, had nodded along. Now she wondered if that had been the first lie. Her mind drifted back to when they first fell in love. It had been at her father's funeral, of all places. She was drowning in grief, sitting alone on a bench outside the church, trying to hold herself together while everyone else offered empty condolences. Daniel had sat down beside her without saying a word. For a moment, they just sat in silence, and then he told her something she never forgot. Grief is proof you loved him right. It was such a simple sentence, but it cracked through her numbness. She looked at him, saw a stranger who somehow understood her pain, and she laughed through her tears. That laugh was the beginning. Their love had grown fast, too fast maybe, but it felt unstoppable. He was attentive, charming, everything she thought she needed after losing so much. Her friends called it fate, her mother called it reckless, but Anna chose him anyway. She wanted to believe in a future, in rebuilding her life with someone who promised to stand beside her. But looking back now, she wondered if that future had been built on sand. By morning, her head pounded from exhaustion, but she forced herself to move. She showered, dressed, and stared into the mirror. Her face looked older somehow, lined with something harsher than time. She told herself she wouldn't let him break her, but the truth was he already had. She just had to decide what to do with the pieces. The letter still gnawed at her. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever. What truth? She couldn't shake it. Her chest tightened every time she thought of it. She needed answers, and waiting for them to fall into her lap wasn't an option. She picked up her phone and scrolled through contacts until she landed on the one person who had always seen through Daniel, her best friend, Claire. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice warm and sharp at the same time. Anna, what's wrong? Anna swallowed hard. He left me. There was silence, then a sharp inhale. What do you mean left you? Like, what? Divorce papers, Anna whispered. Saying it out loud made her stomach flip. And a note. What kind of note? Anna hesitated. I don't know. It feels like a warning. Like there's something I don't know about him. Claire cursed under her breath. I knew something was off. He was too smooth, too polished. I never trusted him. Anna closed her eyes. She wanted comfort, but instead she felt the sting of shame. Why hadn't she seen what Claire saw? Why had she believed in him so blindly? Listen to me, Claire said firmly. You don't chase after him. Let him crawl back if he ever wants to explain. Don't you dare go begging for the truth. But Anna couldn't let it go. The note pulsed in her mind like a wound that wouldn't heal. She mumbled an excuse and ended the call, then sat in the kitchen with a cup of untouched coffee. She needed to know. That afternoon, she went through his office. She had avoided it for weeks, the heavy wooden desk and neat stacks of papers feeling too much like his presence still lingered there. But now she yanked open drawers, pulled files, searched for anything that might tell her what he had been hiding. Receipts, bank statements, contracts. Nothing unusual. Until she found the folder. It was thin, tucked between two stacks as though he didn't want anyone to notice it. Inside were medical papers. She frowned, flipping through them quickly. At first she didn't understand. Then the words jumped out at her. Fertility clinic, failed treatments, sterility. Her hands trembled as she read them again, her pulse roaring in her ears. Daniel had known. He had known all along that he couldn't give her children. And he hadn't told her. Her mind spun, clashing images of their marriage unraveling. All the time she had begged for honesty, all the promises he made about one day. He let her believe it was timing. He let her carry the blame in silence. She pressed the papers to her chest, shaking, fury and heartbreak crashing together. And then another thought struck her like lightning. If Daniel was sterile, then who? Her knees buckled, and she sat hard on the edge of the chair. The note. The warning. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever. Did Daniel know? Did he already suspect what she didn't want to say out loud? Her hands went instinctively to her stomach, a place she hadn't dared to think about in weeks. She had been late. She had brushed it off, told herself it was stress, told herself it was nothing. But now the possibility loomed in front of her, undeniable and terrifying. Anna stumbled to the bathroom, digging through the cabinet until she found the box shoved in the back. She sat on the edge of the tub, shaking, waiting for the test to tell her what she already knew deep down. When the result appeared, clear and undeniable, her breath caught in her throat. Pregnant. She dropped the test onto the floor, her hands covering her face. The room spun as her body shook with sobs. She was pregnant. She was carrying a life inside her. And Daniel wasn't the father. The truth was out now, and it was bigger than anything she could have imagined. Anna sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, the pregnancy test lying beside her like evidence in a trial she didn't know how to fight. The tile was cold under her skin, but her body burned with panic, fear, and something she didn't dare name yet. Every beat of her heart echoed one truth: she was pregnant. And the father wasn't her husband. Her hands trembled as she picked up the test again, as though staring at the result might change it. It didn't. The small word glared back at her, final and merciless. Pregnant. She thought about Daniel, about his note, about the medical files tucked away in his office. He had known his truth. And now she knew hers. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. Memories crashed against her like waves, each one heavier than the last. The night it happened. The moment she crossed a line she never thought she would. She had told herself it was just comfort, just a slip born out of loneliness. But now it was permanent. Life doesn't erase itself. Ethan. His name cut through her mind like glass. She hadn't spoken it aloud in weeks, hadn't allowed herself to even think about him too long. Ethan, with his quiet strength, his unexpected warmth, the man who had looked at her like she was more than the shadow Daniel left behind. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to block the memory of his touch, the way he whispered her name like it was safe with him. It hadn't been supposed to mean anything, but now it meant everything. She dragged herself up from the floor and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, her reflection looked foreign, haunted eyes, pale skin, a woman she barely recognized. She thought of how quickly gossip spread in her world, how fast secrets turned into weapons. What would people say when they found out? Daniel's wife pregnant with another man's child. Her stomach twisted with dread. Still, beneath the fear, something else stirred, a spark she hadn't felt in years. The idea of life. A baby. Something innocent, untouched by betrayal and lies. Her chest ached as she pressed her hand over her stomach. This wasn't just about shame or scandal. This was about a choice she had to make, one that would define her future forever. She knew she couldn't keep this secret for long. Daniel's note echoed in her mind like a curse. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever. He already suspected. Maybe he had left because he knew. Maybe that was the real reason for the papers. The thought made her legs weak again. He hadn't just abandoned her. He had already judged her. The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone, the weight of decision pressing down on her. She scrolled to Ethan's name, her thumb hovering over the screen. Should she tell him? Should she let him know what they had done, what it meant now? Her chest tightened. If she called, she couldn't take it back. Silence still gave her control, but words would set everything in motion. Her finger pressed before she could talk herself out of it. The line rang once, twice, and then his voice filled her ear. Deep, steady, laced with surprise. Anna. She froze, her throat dry. She wanted to hang up, to pretend she had dialed by mistake. But the words tumbled out before she could stop them. I need to see you. There was a pause, a long silence where she imagined him sifting through every possible reason she might be calling. Then his voice, softer now. Where? They met in a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place no one they knew would bother to visit. Anna arrived first, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't drink. When Ethan walked in, her chest tightened. He looked the same, maybe a little more tired, but his eyes locked on hers with the same intensity that had undone her the first time. "Anna," he said gently, sliding into the seat across from her. "What's wrong?" She almost laughed at the question. Everything was wrong. But instead she whispered, "I'm pregnant." His face shifted, shock flickering across it, then something deeper. Fear, hope, confusion, all at once. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "And it's mine." Anna nodded, her eyes burning. She expected him to be angry, or to deny it, or to push the weight back on her shoulders. But instead, he was silent, his gaze locked on her with something she couldn't read. "Say something," she begged, her voice breaking. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know what to say. This changes everything." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I didn't plan this. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. But it did. And now you're carrying my child," he finished for her, his voice low, steady. The words struck her harder than she expected. His child. Not Daniel's. Not the man who had lied to her for years. Ethan's. She wanted to hate the truth, but part of her clung to it, desperate for something real. "Daniel knows something," she whispered. "He left me the papers. And a note. He knows the truth will come out." Ethan leaned forward, his voice firm. "Then let it come out. You don't hide from this. You don't hide from me." She searched his eyes, looking for cracks, for hesitation. But all she saw was resolve. It scared her as much as it comforted her. When she left the cafe, the air felt heavier, every sound sharper. She walked to her car with her heart pounding, her thoughts racing faster than her steps. The secret was no longer hers alone. It belonged to both of them now. And soon, it would belong to the world. That night, she sat in her bedroom, the silence pressing in again. She replayed Ethan's words over and over. "You don't hide from me." It sounded like a promise, but promises had broken her before. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly, whispering to the child inside her. She didn't know how she would face the storm ahead, but she knew she had to. And for the first time since Daniel had walked out, she felt the faintest flicker of something she thought she had lost completely. Not peace, not safety, but strength. "He didn't even let me sit down before dropping the papers on the desk like they were proof of my failures. The office around me had that clean, expensive smell of polished wood and recycled air, the kind that makes you feel like your own breath doesn't belong. Ethan's lawyer sat there in his dark suit, his hands folded neatly like he had practiced this performance 1,000 times before. And maybe he had. Maybe I was just another woman whose husband wanted to cut ties quickly and cleanly. But I wasn't just another woman. I was the one who had carried the weight of Ethan's lies for years, who had been branded as broken, who had been whispered about behind my back in every family gathering. The moment I saw the embossed gold lettering of his firm on that folder, I could almost hear Ethan's voice in my head. Calm, controlled, and cruel. "You couldn't give me what I needed, Anna. And now I have no choice." Those words had been thrown at me in private, carved into my memory like scars on glass. But this, serving me at work, that wasn't about ending a marriage. That was about humiliation, about power, about making sure that when people said my name, they remembered me as the wife who wasn't enough. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I smiled. And that smile wasn't fake. It came from somewhere deep inside me, the place that had been preparing for this moment for months. My hand slid into my purse, brushing past the lipstick I rarely wore, past the receipts I never threw away, until it found the smooth edge of an envelope I had carried like a weapon. When I placed it in front of him, his eyes narrowed. He thought it was some desperate plea, some half-written letter begging for another chance. But when his fingers pulled out the documents and scanned the first page, the color drained from his face. Medical reports. Lab results. The undeniable truth in black and white: Ethan had been sterile since before he met me. Every doctor's visit he had dragged me to, every hushed argument where he accused me of failing him, every time his mother suggested adoption with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, it had all been a cover. A lie wrapped in his arrogance. I leaned back in the chair, letting the silence stretch until it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Then I added the final blow. And before you think this is some tragic story of a barren marriage, you should know, I'm pregnant. His hand froze on the folder. He looked at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. Pregnant. The word itself cracked the air like thunder. The lawyer's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He had no script for this. He was the messenger, not the man who had to clean up the mess. But now the mess was bigger than either of them could have imagined. I didn't tell him how. I didn't explain the quiet trips to the clinic, the treatments I had paid for myself, the way I had decided that my body and my future were mine to reclaim. I didn't owe him that story. All I wanted was for Ethan to look into his lawyer's eyes and know the secret he had buried was about to surface in ways he couldn't control. Imagine that moment. Imagine the way the audience would gasp, the way friends and strangers alike would lean forward, desperate to know what would happen next. Because isn't that the question everyone asks when betrayal is exposed? What now? What now, Ethan? Would he deny it? Would he scramble to silence me? Would his powerful family try to buy me off, like they had done with anyone else who threatened their perfect image? Or would the truth cut so deep it couldn't be bandaged with money or lies? People watching this, what would you do in my shoes? Would you have kept his secret out of pity? Or would you have done what I did? Pull the truth into the light where it belonged? I left the office that day not as the humiliated wife, but as a woman who finally felt the weight sliding off her shoulders. My co-workers stared as I walked past, their whispers sharp as glass against my back. Some pitied me. Some admired me. But none of them knew the whole story. None of them knew that the end of one chapter was the beginning of something far messier, far more dangerous. That evening, when I got home, my phone buzzed with messages from Ethan. At first, they were cold, formal, the way he spoke when he wanted to maintain control. We need to talk. Then, as the minutes passed and I ignored him, the mask slipped. What the hell did you give my lawyer? Where did you get that information? This isn't over. He was unraveling, and I could almost see it, the cracks forming in the polished surface of his empire. Because this wasn't just about our marriage. This was about his image, his family name, his entire dynasty built on appearances. If the world found out he had been lying about something as personal, as primal, as fertility, it would be a scandal his empire couldn't survive. And that's when I realized the truth. For years, I had been the one shrinking under his shadow. But now, he was the one terrified of mine. Later that night, as I sat in my small apartment staring at the city lights outside my window, I pressed my hand to my stomach. I wasn't just carrying a baby. I was carrying proof that the truth always finds a way out, no matter how tightly someone tries to bury it. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was an unknown number. The message was short, chilling in its simplicity. We need to meet. Tomorrow. Alone. If you want to protect your child, don't tell anyone. I stared at the words, my pulse racing. Whoever it was, they knew. They knew more than Ethan, more than his lawyer, maybe even more than I did. And that's when I understood. The storm was only beginning. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the message, the way those words seemed to bleed off the screen like they had been written with intent to scare me. If you want to protect your child, don't tell anyone. It wasn't the kind of threat you could dismiss. It was personal. It was directed. And it knew exactly where to cut. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the faint buzz of the city outside my window, wondering who had sent it. Was it someone connected to Ethan? Someone who knew about the medical records I had just dropped on his lawyer's desk? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone who had been watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you ignore the message, pretend it was nothing more than a scare tactic? Or would you follow it, knowing it could lead you straight into danger, but maybe also into the answers you've been desperate to find? The next morning, I dressed with shaky hands. Nothing dramatic, just jeans and a sweater. Something about blending in felt safer. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my sister, not my coworkers, not even the one friend who still checked on me after everything fell apart. The message had been clear, alone. And maybe it was reckless, maybe it was foolish, but a part of me felt like I had already crossed the point of no return. The place they told me to meet wasn't glamorous. It was an old diner tucked off a side street I rarely drove down. The neon sign flickered, half the letters burned out so it just read, "Den." Inside, the air smelled of grease and burnt coffee, the kind of place where secrets felt like they belonged. I slid into a booth near the back, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Minutes ticked by, the waitress poured me coffee I didn't touch, and just when I thought I had made a mistake, he walked in. Tall, lean, dressed in a suit that looked expensive but wrinkled from being worn too long. His face was tired, sharp, like someone who had been carrying a story too heavy for too many years. He didn't smile. He didn't even greet me. He just sat across from me, folded his hands, and said, "You don't know me, but I know Ethan. And you're in more danger than you realize." My throat went dry. Danger. The word echoed in my head like a warning siren. He pulled out a small folder, much like the one I had handed Ethan's lawyer, and slid it across the table. My hands hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos, grainy, black and white, clearly surveillance shots. Ethan, but not the Ethan I knew. Ethan at night, slipping into hotels with people I didn't recognize. Ethan handing off envelopes to men whose faces were half hidden in shadows. Ethan looking over his shoulder like he had secrets even darker than the ones I had already uncovered. I glanced up, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" The man leaned forward. "Proof. Ethan isn't just the liar you think he is. He's tied to people who don't like their business exposed. And now that you've made your move, they'll come for you. For your child." I felt the world tilt beneath me. I thought I had known the worst of him, that his betrayal was personal, private, confined to the walls of our broken marriage. But this was something else. This was Ethan tangled in something dangerous enough that strangers were warning me to protect myself. The man lowered his voice. "He's been laundering money through his family's company. Dirty deals, offshore accounts, bribes. It's bigger than you think. And now that you've threatened his reputation, you've become a liability." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook against the table, the photos blurring before my eyes. What do you even say when the man you once promised to love, the man who stood at an altar and swore vows, turns out to be living a life you can barely comprehend. I asked the only question that made sense. Why are you telling me this? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that almost resembled pity. Because I made the mistake of trusting him once too. And it cost me everything. I wanted to ask more, to dig into his story, but he slid out of the booth before I could. He left money on the table for the untouched coffee and walked away without another word, like his role in this chapter was over. I sat there frozen, staring at the photos, feeling like the ground beneath my life had just opened up. The waitress came by, asked if I was okay, and I forced a smile I didn't feel. When I finally stepped out of the diner, the morning sun felt harsh, almost intrusive, like it was spotlighting every lie I had ever believed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message, this time from Ethan. We need to meet. Alone. Tonight. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He knew. Maybe not about the man at the diner, but about the shift in power. He felt it. And he was trying to grab hold before it slipped away completely. I walked home with my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? Confront him head-on, armed with these new photos? Or play along, pretending I was still the quiet, obedient wife he thought I was, while I figured out my next move? Every choice felt dangerous. Every step forward felt like it was being watched. And maybe it was. That night, I stood by my window, the city glowing below, and thought about everyone who had ever doubted me, everyone who had ever whispered behind my back. They thought my story was about infertility, about a failed marriage, about a woman left behind. They had no idea it was about something much darker. I touched my stomach again, the same way I had the night before, and I made a silent promise. This child would not be born into fear. But then came the sound that made my heart stop. A car engine idling outside my building. Not moving. Just sitting. Waiting. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek. A black car. Windows tinted. No license plate visible. And in that instant, I knew. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The car didn't move for almost an hour. I kept checking the window, pacing my apartment like an animal trapped in a cage. Every sound outside felt amplified, the slam of a door, the bark of a dog, the faint echo of footsteps on the street below. My phone buzzed more than once, Ethan's messages piling up, each one shorter, sharper, more insistent. Where are you? We need to talk. Don't ignore me. I thought about calling the police. But what would I even say? That a car was parked outside my building? That my ex-husband, who looked perfect on paper, was secretly dangerous? Without proof, I'd just be dismissed as paranoid, or worse, unstable. And wasn't that what Ethan always wanted, to paint me as the hysterical one, the woman who couldn't be trusted? So I sat there in silence, staring out at the car, wondering if the person inside was watching me, wondering if they were waiting for me to slip, to step outside, to make myself vulnerable. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the engine started and the car drove away, disappearing into the night as though it had never been there. But the fear didn't leave with it. It stayed, lingering in the corners of my apartment, pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. The next morning, I told myself I had to take control, even if it meant walking straight into the fire. I texted Ethan back. Fine. Tonight. Your office. 8 o'clock. The reply came almost instantly. Good. Don't be late. All day, I moved through the hours like a ghost, my body present but my mind somewhere else. I tried to work, tried to eat, tried to function, but the truth was, nothing felt normal anymore. Every glance from a stranger carried weight. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. By the time the clock hit 7, I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I dressed carefully, deliberately. A black coat, boots that wouldn't make noise on polished floors, my hair pulled back tight. Not because I wanted to impress him, those days were gone, but because I needed to feel like armor. When I arrived at his office building, the night air was crisp, the kind of cold that cuts straight through skin. The lobby was quiet, too quiet, with only a security guard half asleep behind the desk. He barely glanced at me as I signed in, his pen scratching lazily against the paper. The elevator ride up felt endless. Each ding of the passing floors tightened the knot in my stomach. By the time the doors opened, my hands were trembling, though I forced them still before stepping into the hallway. His office door was already open, light spilling into the corridor. I could hear the faint sound of music, jazz, something smooth and low, almost mocking in its calmness. I walked in, and there he was. Ethan, behind his desk, looking polished and untouchable in his tailored suit. He smiled like nothing had ever happened, like the years of lies and betrayal had been erased with one charming curve of his lips. "You came," he said, rising to his feet. "I wasn't sure you would." I didn't sit. I stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, and met his gaze head-on. "What do you want, Ethan?" He studied me, his eyes sharp, calculating. "To talk. To fix this before you destroy both of us." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Destroy us? You did that all on your own." His jaw tightened. For a flicker of a second, I saw the mask slip, the control falter. But then it was back, smooth as ever. He moved around the desk, closing the space between us, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Those files you handed over? They don't just hurt me. They hurt people who don't forgive easily. People who know how to make problems disappear." My heart pounded, but I refused to step back. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you dragged me into your mess." He leaned in, so close I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, that scent I used to find comforting but now felt like poison. "You're playing a game you can't win." For a moment, the silence between us felt heavy enough to shatter glass. Then I pulled the folder from my bag, the one the stranger had given me at the diner, and tossed it onto his desk. His face changed. Not shock, not anger exactly, but something darker. Recognition. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice sharper now, stripped of charm. "Does it matter? You've been lying for years. I know who you really are." He opened the folder, flipped through the photos, his hands tightening on the edges of the paper. When he looked back at me, his eyes were cold, lethal. "You shouldn't have this," he said slowly. "And whoever gave it to you just signed their own death warrant." I swallowed hard, but kept my chin high. "Maybe. Or maybe it's you who's finally out of time." We stood there, locked in a stare that felt like war. Neither of us willing to back down. And then, without warning, he slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing through the room. "Leave," he said, his voice low and final. "Go home. Pretend you never saw this. If you care about your child, you'll walk away now." My hands trembled at my sides, but I forced them steady. "You don't get to control me anymore." I turned and walked out before he could answer, the air in the hallway thick, suffocating. By the time the elevator doors closed, my legs felt weak, but I refused to let myself collapse. Not yet. Outside, the city lights blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not tears of weakness, tears of fury. Because no matter what he thought, this wasn't over. I took the long way home, circling blocks, checking mirrors, making sure no one followed me. But when I finally reached my building, that same black car was back, parked in the same spot, engine running, waiting. This time, I didn't go inside. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at it, my breath clouding in the night air. And then the back window rolled down, just enough for me to see the glint of eyes watching me. A voice called out, low and steady, "Get in. If you want to live, get in." My body froze, every instinct screaming at once. The car door opened, waiting. And in that moment, I had to decide, step into the unknown, or walk away and risk everything. I didn't move at first. My feet felt glued to the pavement, my pulse racing so fast it drowned out every sound around me. The open car door looked like a trap, but so did staying where I was. Whoever was inside already knew where I lived, already knew how to find me. Maybe they had been watching me longer than I realized. The voice came again, firmer this time. "Get in. We don't have much time." I took a step forward, then another. My hands shook as I gripped the doorframe and slid into the back seat. The door shut with a heavy thud that sealed my choice. The air inside was thick with tension, the faint smell of leather and cigarette smoke pressing against me. The man sitting beside me wasn't a stranger, not entirely. I recognized him from one of the blurry photos in the folder, the ones showing Ethan handing off envelopes late at night. Up close, his face was sharper, marked by lines of exhaustion and something harder, something dangerous. He didn't waste words. "You've got yourself in deep, deeper than you understand. And if you don't listen to me right now, you won't live to tell anyone about it." I pressed my back against the seat, my voice barely steady. "Then tell me why I should trust you." He smirked, but it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief. "Because I'm the only one who doesn't want you dead." The car pulled away from the curb, the city lights sliding past the tinted windows like streaks of fire. I kept my eyes on him, trying to read the truth in his expression, but his face was as closed as Ethan's had been. He leaned forward, spoke low, like the driver couldn't be trusted either. "Ethan thinks you're a liability. He's not wrong. You know too much, and you don't realize how much you've stirred up. But he isn't the one you should be most afraid of. It's the people behind him, the ones he answers to." His words landed like blows. I had thought Ethan was the center of this mess, the source of all the lies. But now he sounded like just a piece of a larger puzzle, and that was somehow worse. The man continued. "He launders their money, keeps their names clean while he takes the heat if anything leaks. That folder you've got? That's just a crack in the wall. If the whole thing comes down, they won't hesitate to silence anyone who stands too close, including you." I forced myself to ask the question I'd been avoiding. "Then why not just kill me already?" He looked at me for the first time with something almost human in his eyes. "Because you're carrying his child. And that makes you leverage." The car turned sharply, and I grabbed the edge of the seat to steady myself. The word leverage rattled inside me, heavy and cold. My child wasn't even born yet, and already they were a pawn in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I pressed him harder. "What do you want from me?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "To stay alive, you need to stop pretending you're in control. This isn't about you and Ethan anymore. It's about survival. Yours, and your baby's." I stared out the window, my reflection pale against the dark glass. I hated every word coming out of his mouth because they made sense. And they forced me to face the truth I had been avoiding, that I was already in too deep to walk away. The car slowed, pulling into an underground garage. The driver parked near the far corner, where the shadows swallowed most of the light. The man beside me opened his door and gestured for me to follow. I hesitated. "Where are we?" "A safe place," he said, though his tone carried no warmth. "For now." I stepped out, the concrete cold beneath my boots, the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the walls. He led me to a side door, through a narrow hallway, and into a small room that looked more like a bunker than an apartment. Metal door, no windows, a single lamp casting yellow light across the bare furniture. "This is where you'll stay until it's safe," he said, locking the door behind us. I spun to face him. "Safe from who?" "From Ethan?" "From you." He met my anger without flinching. "From all of them, including Ethan." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but exhaustion weighed heavier than rage. I sank onto the worn couch, clutching my stomach again without even realizing it. The gesture wasn't lost on him. His eyes flicked down, then back up. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "But strength won't save you this time. Strategy will." He turned toward the door, his hand on the lock. "Rest. You'll need it." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in a room that felt less like safety and more like a cell. I sat there for hours, listening to the hum of the lamp, the faint creaks of the building, my mind replaying every choice that had led me here. Trusting Ethan, loving him, believing in him, and now being hunted because of him. But beneath the fear, something else started to grow. A determination I hadn't felt before. If they thought I was leverage, if they thought I was just a pawn, then maybe that was my advantage. Because pawns can still take down kings, if you play them right. I closed my eyes, breathing deep, steadying myself. Tomorrow, I would find a way to turn this around. But tomorrow never came the way I expected. It started with the sound of the lock turning. I shot up, my heart hammering. The door creaked open, and in stepped the last person I ever expected to see standing there. Ethan. His eyes found mine immediately, cold and sharp in the dim light. He shut the door behind him, the click of the lock louder than thunder in the silence. And he said just one thing, his voice steady and terrifyingly calm. "You shouldn't have trusted them." She thought she had already survived the worst of it. But some conversations don't wound you with sharp edges, they cut with the truth you've been avoiding, the kind that sinks in slow and burns hotter the longer you sit with it. It was a Sunday afternoon when Anna finally agreed to meet Ethan at the quiet corner of Lincoln Park. The air smelled like damp leaves, the kind that fall in clusters and stick to your shoes, forcing you to drag more weight than you realize. She sat on a bench under a tree that had already dropped half its crown, red and gold scattered like confetti that had celebrated the wrong victory. She was clutching a coffee she didn't want and waiting for a man she didn't trust, not anymore. He came without his lawyer, without his armor. Just Ethan, tall in a navy coat, looking every bit like the successful man Chicago papers still praised as if he had earned his life without anyone's help. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't see arrogance first. She saw hesitation. That made her angry. She didn't want hesitation. She wanted him to say it out loud, that he had lied, that he had painted her as the broken one, that he had watched her suffer and did nothing. He sat beside her, close enough to share warmth, not close enough to risk touch. The silence stretched, and Anna let it, sipping the bitter coffee that burned her tongue. He was the one who should struggle for words. "You blindsided me," he said finally. She turned her head and studied his profile, his jaw clenched like it always did when he wasn't in control. "Did I?" she asked, her voice sharper than the air. "I thought you were the master of blindsiding, Ethan." "Papers at my office?" Really? He winced, but she pressed on, refusing to soften. You humiliated me in front of people who thought we had a perfect life. But I smiled. I handed your lawyer that envelope. And when he opened it, he looked like death itself. Do you want to know why? He didn't answer. She leaned closer. Because it was your secret, Ethan. Not mine. You're the one who can't have children. You're the one who made me feel defective for years. I carried your shame like it was mine. Not anymore. The words left her body like fire, but the silence after was worse. She had expected denial, rage, anything. Instead, he stared down at the fallen leaves, eyes wet but not blinking. I was scared, he whispered finally. Scared. That was all he had. Scared of what? Losing face, losing control, losing her? She wanted to scream, but part of her chest caved at the sound of his voice. He had never said it before. What about me? She asked. You think I wasn't scared? Month after month of tests, whispers, my own mother asking why we hadn't given her grandkids yet. Do you know what that does to a woman? He looked at her then, really looked, and his lips parted like he wanted to say her name, but no sound came. The pause broke her. She stood, pacing in front of the bench, coffee spilling onto her hand. She didn't even flinch at the heat. Ethan, you didn't just break our marriage. You broke me. And then you filed for divorce like you were the victim. He rose slowly, but not to tower over her. He looked smaller somehow. The man who had built towers across New York now seemed like a child standing in ruins. You're pregnant, he said suddenly, as if the words had been choking him. Her stomach clenched. She hadn't planned to say it today. Not like this. Yes, she said, steadying her breath. And no, it's not what you think. I didn't cheat. I took back my own future. Fertility treatments. My choice. My body. My life. Something you'll never control again. His face drained, pale like the lawyer's when he first saw the papers. His hands trembled, the same hands that had once built empires. So the baby is mine, she cut in, voice firm. And you don't get to rewrite that story. The park felt too quiet. Somewhere a jogger's footsteps echoed, a dog barked, a car horn blared faintly. But around them, everything was still. He sank back on the bench, covering his face with his hands. For the first time, Anna saw him not as a giant, not as a man with power over her, but as someone cornered by his own lies. She didn't pity him. But she also didn't feel the triumph she thought she'd feel. Instead, her chest tightened with something messier. The audience would want to know, what happens when the person who hurt you finally shows cracks? Do you punish them, or do you listen? What would you do if you were Anna? Walk away for good, or lean in just enough to hear their truth? Anna didn't know yet. Ethan lowered his hands and whispered, I never wanted to lose you. Her laugh came bitter, slicing through the autumn air. You lost me the day you blamed me for what was never my fault. She turned to leave, her boots crunching leaves, her pulse racing faster than her steps. She felt his eyes on her back, heavy, pleading, but she didn't turn. Halfway across the path, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She yanked it out, expecting a friend, maybe her doctor. But the name on the screen froze her blood. It wasn't family. It wasn't work. It was a number tied to Ethan's family business, the empire in New York she had never been welcome in. And the text was only 3 words. We need you. Her throat closed. She glanced back at Ethan, who hadn't moved from the bench. He didn't look like a man who had sent that message. He looked lost. So who had? And why her? After everything. The text burned on her screen long after she shoved the phone back into her pocket. We need you. 3 words, but heavy enough to make her chest tighten like a locked box. She told herself it could be a mistake. Maybe spam, maybe some scammer trying to get her rattled. But deep down she knew better. The number belonged to Ethan's family company, the one she had always been kept at a polite distance from, like a guest in her own marriage. When she reached her car, her hands shook so much she dropped the keys twice before starting the engine. She kept seeing Ethan's face in the park, his pale skin, his hands covering his eyes like a child ashamed of being caught. That image mixed with the message, and together they pushed at her nerves until she had to pull over before she crashed. She sat in the car by the curb, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked older, sharper, like someone who had lived through fire. Maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same number. Do not tell Ethan. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't spam. This wasn't random. This was personal. And whoever it was knew enough to warn her against the one man who used to know every detail of her life. She tried to think. Who in his family would reach out to her now, after they'd ignored her for years? His father, Richard? Cold as ice, a man who thought Anna was a mistake from the start. His sister, Claire? Sweet once, but she had chosen loyalty to blood over friendship. None of it made sense. Her pulse hammered. Curiosity was a dangerous thing, but it also drove her like a current she couldn't fight. She texted back before her better judgment could stop her. What do you want? The reply came fast. Meet me. Tonight. 9 p.m. Don't bring him. No name. No details. Just a time. Anna leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. The baby inside her, barely weeks along, felt like both her shield and her vulnerability. She wanted to scream at herself for even considering walking into whatever trap this could be. But something inside whispered, "This is bigger than you." The hours crawled. She spent the afternoon pacing her apartment, her thoughts colliding like waves. She replayed Ethan's voice in the park, the way it broke when he said he never wanted to lose her. Did he already know about this? Was he part of it? The warning told her not to trust him, but old habits pulled her in the opposite direction. At 8:30, she slipped into a dark coat and scarf, pulled her hood low, and drove toward the address that had finally come through, a quiet brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of building where secrets could hide behind perfect facades. She parked down the street and walked the last block, her heart pounding in rhythm with each step. The street was almost empty, just a couple holding hands, a man walking his dog, and one lone light burning in the top-floor window of the brownstone. She rang the bell. No answer. Just when she was about to turn away, the door clicked open on its own. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old paper. She climbed the narrow staircase, every creak under her boots sounding like a warning. At the top, a door stood ajar. She pushed it gently. And there she was. Claire. Ethan's younger sister. Anna froze in the doorway, words failing her. Claire looked thinner, shadows under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in weeks. She motioned Anna inside quickly, shutting the door and locking it. "You came," Claire whispered. "You sent those texts?" Anna asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Claire nodded, wringing her hands. "I didn't know who else to trust. You're the only one outside the family who knows the truth." "What truth?" Anna asked, though her stomach already twisted with the sense that she was about to step into another storm. Claire's lips trembled. "It's not just about Ethan. It's about all of us. And if you don't help, everything he's built, everything my father hides, it's going to fall. And it won't just take him down. It'll take you too. Anna laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You think I care about saving Ethan's empire? After what he did to me? Claire's eyes filled with tears, but her voice turned sharp. This isn't about him anymore. It's about survival. Yours. Mine. And maybe that baby's. Anna's breath caught. Claire knew. Somehow she knew. How? Doesn't matter. Claire cut in. What matters is you're in danger, Anna. More than you realize. My father knows about the pregnancy. He's already planning what to do with that information. The room seemed to shrink, walls pressing in. Anna gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. What are you saying? That Richard would... What? Use my baby as leverage? That's insane. Claire didn't answer. She just looked at Anna with eyes that begged her to believe. Outside, a car door slammed. Both women froze. Claire rushed to the window, peeking through the curtain. Her face drained of color. They're here, she whispered. Who? Anna asked, panic flooding her veins. Claire turned back, her voice trembling. If you stay, you'll see. But you won't get another chance to leave. Not after tonight. The doorknob downstairs rattled. Heavy footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Anna's body screamed at her to run, but her legs locked in place. She looked at Claire, who looked back with fear so raw it needed no explanation. Whatever secret this family was hiding, it was about to come crashing into her life in a way she couldn't escape. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, each one sending a jolt through Anna's chest. Claire pressed a finger to her lips, eyes wide with warning. The doorknob on the apartment door twisted, rattled, then stilled. Silence stretched so tight it felt like it might snap. Anna's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She thought of her baby, of how reckless she had been to walk into this place. But it was too late to undo. The world outside that door was about to change everything. Then a voice. Deep, controlled, but cold enough to raise goosebumps on her arms. Claire. Open the door. Richard. Ethan's father. Claire staggered back, her lips trembling as she shook her head. No, she whispered. Not like this. Anna froze. Richard was the last person she expected to face tonight. He had always carried himself like a king on a throne, untouchable, unshakable. But hearing him outside the door, demanding entry like a wolf clawing at the edge of the den, made him feel more dangerous than ever. The lock jiggled. Then a sudden bang. He was forcing his way in. Claire grabbed Anna's arm, pulling her toward the window. Fire escape, she mouthed. Anna's body resisted, panic making her stumble. What about you? She whispered back. Claire shoved her toward the window. Go. Another bang on the door. The wood cracked. Anna threw the window open, the night air hitting her like a slap. She climbed out, her boots scraping the iron steps of the fire escape. She gripped the railing, forcing herself down as quietly as she could. Each creak felt like a gunshot in the silence. Halfway down, she risked a glance back up. Claire still stood by the window, staring at her with eyes that begged forgiveness. Then the apartment door burst open behind her, and Richard stepped in. Anna didn't wait. She pushed herself faster down the stairs, the metal biting her hands. She reached the alley, sprinted into the street, and didn't stop running until her lungs burned. When she finally slowed, she ducked behind a dumpster, pressing her back against the cold metal. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest heaved like it was trying to break open. What had she just walked into? What did Claire mean about survival, about Richard knowing she was pregnant? Questions swarmed her, but answers felt miles away. Her phone buzzed. For a moment, she thought it was Claire, but the screen showed Ethan's name. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over decline. But something in her refused to shut him out completely. She swiped to answer. Anna. His voice was ragged, frantic. Where are you? Her throat tightened. She almost blurted everything, the fire escape, Richard, Claire's warning. But instinct held her tongue. Why? She asked instead. Why do you care now? I've been trying to protect you, Ethan said, his words tumbling out. You don't understand. My father. I just saw your father, Anna cut in, her voice sharp. You want to explain why he's chasing your sister through a locked apartment? The silence on the other end told her more than any explanation could. Ethan knew. He had always known. Anna, he finally said, softer now, almost breaking. Please. Let me find you. Let me explain before it's too late. She wanted to hang up, to end it all right there. But the sound of his voice pulled at her like gravity. Against her better judgment, she whispered her location. 15 minutes later, headlights swept the alley. Ethan's car rolled to a stop. He jumped out, his hair disheveled, his face pale, like he hadn't slept in days. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't. Anna, he said, desperation raw in his tone. You shouldn't have gone to Claire. Her stomach clenched. So you knew she reached out? He looked down, his jaw tight. I told her not to. It's too dangerous. Dangerous? Anna snapped. Your father breaking down doors is dangerous. Your family keeping secrets from me is dangerous. Me carrying your child while you all circle me like vultures. Yeah, Ethan, I'd say it's dangerous. His head jerked up, eyes wide. You told her. Anna blinked, confused. Told who? Claire, he said, stepping closer. Did you tell her about the baby? Her chest tightened. No. She already knew. Ethan staggered back like she had struck him. He raked his hands through his hair, muttering under his breath. God, no. That means... He stopped, his eyes locking on hers, wild and afraid. That means my father knows too. Anna's blood ran cold. Claire's words echoed back. He's already planning what to do with that information. She wanted to ask what that meant, but Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the car. We can't stay here. He'll find us. She resisted, yanking her hand free. I'm not going anywhere with you until you tell me the truth. He turned, his face twisted with conflict, torn between fear and confession. Finally he spoke, his voice low and urgent. My father, he's not just a businessman. He's been moving money for people you don't want to cross. Dangerous people. And now that you're pregnant, Ethan swallowed hard. He sees that baby as a way to lock me in, to keep me loyal, to control both of us. Anna staggered back, her hand flying to her stomach. She felt sick, like the world was tilting under her feet. You're lying, she whispered, though part of her already believed. I wish I was, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Anna, if you stay near him, he'll use you. If you try to fight him, he'll destroy you. And if you leave without me, he'll come after you anyway. You have no idea what he's capable of. Tears blurred her vision, but rage burned through them. And you? What are you capable of, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, you're just as guilty for keeping me in the dark. He reached for her again, but she stepped back, shaking her head. No more secrets. Either you tell me everything now, or I walk away for good. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He looked at her like a man drowning. Then you need to hear it all. But not here. Not on the street. Please. The sincerity in his eyes wavered her resolve, but before she could answer, a black SUV turned the corner, its headlights sweeping over them. Ethan's face went white. It's him. The SUV slowed, creeping closer. Anna's heart pounded. She didn't know if she should run, scream, or jump into Ethan's car. The SUV's window rolled down, and a shadowed figure inside raised a hand, pointing directly at her. Ethan shoved her toward the passenger seat. "Get in," he shouted. Anna's legs refused to move, frozen by terror and fury. The SUV door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face hidden by the dark. And then she heard it, Richard's voice again, calm, steady, and chilling. "Anna, come with me now, or you won't live to regret it." Her feet felt glued to the ground. The street was empty except for the two cars and the men who stood like shadows between them. Ethan gripped her arm, his voice low and fierce. "Don't move." But her body was already trembling with the urge to bolt. Richard's presence filled the street like smoke, suffocating, inescapable. He didn't shout. He didn't chase. He simply stood there, calm and steady, as if he already owned the night. "Anna," he said again, his tone sharp but not loud. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Every part of her wanted to scream back, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "You don't get to tell me what to do." Ethan tugged her closer, his body angled protectively in front of hers. "Get in the car," he whispered. "Now." The man beside Richard took a step forward, the kind of step that told her he was there for muscle, not words. She knew if she hesitated any longer, they would drag her away whether she wanted it or not. So she ran. Ethan yanked the passenger door open, and she dove inside just as he slid behind the wheel. Tires screeched against pavement as the SUV lunged after them. The chase blurred into chaos. Streetlights flashed overhead, horns blared as Ethan swerved through traffic, and Anna clutched the dashboard, every bump jolting her stomach. She prayed her baby could withstand the pounding of her heartbeat. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "Somewhere safe," Ethan muttered, his jaw clenched. "You said that before," she snapped. "Nothing's safe with you." He flinched but didn't argue, his eyes fixed on the mirror as the SUV closed in. When Ethan cut down a narrow side street, the SUV followed. Its headlights burned brighter, closer, until the glare filled the car like a spotlight. Anna bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. "He's not stopping." "He won't," Ethan said flatly. "Not until he has what he wants." "And what's that?" Ethan didn't answer. They shot through another intersection, nearly clipping a cab. The driver leaned on his horn, but the sound vanished behind the roar of engines. Anna's nails dug into the seat. She couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. All she could see was the looming black vehicle behind them, relentless as fate. Finally, Ethan made a sharp turn into a parking garage. He sped up the ramp, tires squealing, then killed the headlights and swerved into a dark corner. "Get down," he ordered. Anna ducked low, her hands pressed over her stomach. The SUV rolled in seconds later, its lights sweeping across the garage. It slowed, prowling the levels like a predator sniffing for prey. They waited. Every creak of the structure felt like footsteps. Every shadow felt alive. When the SUV finally passed and disappeared back out the exit, Anna sagged against the seat, trembling. "That won't hold him off for long," Ethan muttered. "We have to move." Anna snapped her head toward him. "No." Not until you tell me everything. I'm done running blind. Ethan's hand gripped the wheel, knuckles white. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sigh that sounded like defeat, he finally spoke. My father isn't just laundering money. He's been buying people. Judges, politicians, police. And now, he wants you. The baby makes you leverage. He thinks if he controls you, he controls me forever. Anna shook her head, tears burning hot. And you kept this from me? You let me walk around thinking I was crazy while your father planned my life like I'm some piece on his board. I was trying to protect you, Ethan said, his voice cracking. The less you knew, the safer you were. Safe? She spat. You call this safe? Him chasing me through the streets? Him threatening me in the middle of the night? Her words cut deep. She could see it in the way his face tightened. But she didn't care. Anger felt better than fear. Silence filled the car until Anna broke it again, her voice lower now, trembling but firm. What happens if I don't play along? Ethan turned to her, his eyes hollow. Then he'll destroy you. And if that doesn't work, he'll destroy me. He'll make sure our child grows up under his thumb, whether we like it or not. Her throat ached, the weight of his words crushing. She had thought betrayal was the worst thing Ethan could hand her. She was wrong. The truth was heavier, darker, and far more dangerous. She leaned her head back, shutting her eyes. For a moment she let herself imagine another life, one where love was enough, where family meant safety instead of war. But when she opened her eyes, the cold glow of the parking garage reminded her, this was the life she had. Then we fight, she whispered, surprising even herself. Ethan looked at her, startled. Anna, I'm not running anymore, she said, her voice gaining strength. I don't care how powerful your father is. I don't care how deep his reach goes. If he thinks he owns me, he's wrong. And if he thinks he can use my baby, he'll have to go through me first. Something shifted in Ethan's face, a flicker of pride mixed with fear. If you stay, it won't just be you against him. It'll be us. But once we start, there's no going back. She stared at him, searching his eyes for any sign of the man she once loved without question. She saw brokenness, regret, and maybe still, buried deep, the truth of who he was before the lies. Then we start, she said. Before he could answer, the sound of an engine echoed through the garage. Headlights flashed again, sweeping across the concrete. Anna's stomach dropped. The SUV had returned. But as the vehicle rolled into view, her heart stumbled for another reason. This wasn't Richard's car. A different man stepped out, dressed in black, his face half hidden beneath a cap. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like someone paid to do the work others were too clean to touch. He spotted them instantly. His hand went to his jacket, pulling out something metallic that caught the light. Ethan shoved the gear into drive, but before the car could lurch forward, the man lifted the weapon and aimed directly at Anna. The gun aimed straight at her, cold and steady, as if the man holding it had no heartbeat. Anna froze, her body screaming to move but locked by terror. Ethan's hand gripped the wheel so hard she thought it might snap. "Get down!" he shouted. But she couldn't. Her eyes were glued to the weapon, to the way the man's finger curled around the trigger. It felt inevitable, like the end was already written. Then the shot cracked the air. Glass shattered, raining across her lap. Anna ducked, covering her stomach, her scream muffled by the roar of tires as Ethan slammed the car forward. The vehicle lurched, scraping against concrete as sparks flew. The man fired again, the bullet thudding into the trunk. They shot out of the garage into the night, speeding blindly through red lights. Anna shook uncontrollably, glass cutting her palms where she held her stomach. Ethan's face was set in grim lines. That wasn't my father's man. That was someone else. Someone else, she yelled. How many people are after us? His silence was answer enough. By the time they reached the river, Anna could barely keep her eyes open. The adrenaline was gone, leaving her drained and aching. Ethan parked near an abandoned warehouse, pulling her out quickly. She resisted, her voice raw. Where are we? Why here? Because nobody looks for hope in ruins, he said. Inside the warehouse, it was cold, the smell of rust and dust filling the air. Ethan pulled off his jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. He crouched in front of her, his face finally stripped of defenses. I need you to understand something, he said softly. If you stay with me, you'll never be free of my father. But if you leave now, I'll make sure he never finds you. Her chest ached. And you? Where will you be? His eyes glistened. Where I belong. Fighting him. Even if it kills me. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream at him for offering sacrifice instead of love. She wanted to beg him not to leave her again. But all she said was, I don't want this baby to grow up fatherless. For the first time, Ethan let the mask slip completely. His shoulders shook. His hands covered his face. And in that moment, she saw not the man who betrayed her, but the boy who once made her laugh on the darkest day of her life. Morning light seeped through cracks in the walls when the sound of engines woke them. Anna sat up, her heart leaping to her throat. Ethan pulled her behind a stack of crates, peering through the slats. Black cars. Men in suits. And Richard himself, stepping out like a general arriving on the battlefield. Ethan's jaw tightened. He tracked us. Anna grabbed his arm. Then we run. He shook his head. No more running. Before she could stop him, Ethan stood, stepping into the open. Richard's head snapped toward him, a smile curling like a knife. Son, Richard called, spreading his arms. Finally. The men circled, but Richard waved them back. His eyes shifted to Anna, who clutched her stomach, fury burning hotter than fear. You think you can own me? She shouted across the space. I'm not your pawn. Richard's smile didn't falter. No, my dear. You're much more valuable than that. You're the mother of my heir. Anna felt the words like poison in her veins. Ethan moved between them, his voice sharp. She's not yours to control. Richard's eyes hardened. Then prove it. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. And then chaos exploded. One of Richard's men lunged forward. Ethan fought like a man with nothing left to lose, fists slamming, body colliding, grunts echoing off steel walls. Anna ducked behind crates, her heart pounding, every crash and shout threatening to end with his last breath. She searched desperately for something, anything to use. Her hand closed around a rusted metal pipe. She gripped it, knuckles white, and when one of the men cornered her, she swung with every ounce of strength she had. The sound cracked through the warehouse, the man dropping to the ground. Anna gasped, staring at her own shaking hands. She had never wanted violence. But survival had no rules. By the time the fight ended, Ethan stood bleeding but alive. Richard, however, remained untouched, watching with a calm that chilled her more than fists or guns. You can fight me all you want, he said, his voice steady. But in the end, you'll see I'm right. Blood binds tighter than love. Ethan spit blood onto the floor. Not this time. Richard's eyes flicked to Anna. For a moment, She thought he might order his men to kill them both. Instead, he simply turned, signaling for his men to retreat. "This isn't over," he said as he walked away. The cars rolled out, leaving silence heavy in their wake. Anna rushed to Ethan, pressing her hands to his wounds. "You need a hospital." He winced, shaking his head. "No hospitals. Not safe." She bit her lip, tears streaming. "Then what?" "We just keep running until one of us dies." He looked at her, his hand finding hers, gripping it weakly but with a weight that anchored her. "No. We keep fighting. Together. For the baby. For us. If you'll still have me." Her heart twisted. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to leave him bleeding on the floor of that warehouse. But love was a cruel, stubborn thing. It clung even when logic screamed to let go. She leaned down, her forehead against his. "If we do this, Ethan, no more lies. Not one. Promise me." His voice cracked. "I promise." The city outside kept moving, blind to the war that had just begun in its shadows. But inside that broken warehouse, Anna felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not safety. Not peace. But resolve. She didn't know if they would survive Richard, or the men behind him, or the weight of their own past. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. They weren't his to own. And no matter how dark the nights ahead, she would fight with everything in her to keep it that way.